help. Can you help me, please? I'm stuck.
I don't think that's a good idea. I have zero experience in lumberjacking.
Thank God you're here. Can you make some food? I've been stuck here for 6 days, and all I've had to eat are 2 pine cones.
Well, I'm not a nutritionist, so I wouldn't know what someone in your condition would...
Do something!
Do what? I'm not a zoologist.
There's a gun in the tent. Get the gun.
I don't have a license. I've never operated...
Look, just throw a rock or something.
I'm not a geologist. I don't know which one would be most effective.
Oh, I don't want to die. I don't even know if I'll get into heaven. Do you at least know how to get into heaven?
Well, actually, I'm a Christian, but I'm not a theologian, so I wouldn't really know what to say to you. But, you know, if you ever get out of here, you really should look into it.
Oh, he's coming! Run!
But I have no formal training in long-distance running.
Oh, we can laugh, but Zach just read a story to us from the Bible. That's pretty common, isn't it? See, we don't do that out loud because someone might hear us and we know how silly that sounds. But in our mind, have you ever had, you don't have to raise your hand, but have you ever had that conversation with God? You know, I have. So if it makes you feel any better, you can say yes inside. If you're saying no, you're probably lying to yourself, but that's, we do. We struggle with that. I'm going to put up a symbol here, and I want you to tell me what you see when you see this symbol. What do you think of? Nike, okay, but what else do you think of? Just do it, right? Just do it. We think of Nike because that's their symbol. Just do it. Just do it. And today we're finishing up. Next week we'll have our interactive, so technically we're finishing up next week. But we've been looking at the anatomy of a servant, what it looks like to be a servant, sitting in that third chair, if you will, as we've been talking about these 3 chairs throughout the year. That third chair of serving Jesus. And we've been looking at this anatomy, and we've looked at what's it look like? What's a servant have? We've been looking at the story of Esther. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. We'll actually be telling more of the story today than we'll be reading. There's a little bit we'll read, but the book of Esther, hopefully you've read through it. But what are the things that a servant is? Well, a servant, first of all, is available. We talked about that a servant is willing to serve when they're available. They're available to serve. They're not, I'm sorry, my schedule's too full. They're available. A servant is willing to serve. We also talked about the fact that a servant is teachable. The servant is teachable, that sometimes we think that this is the right path, but then someone comes along and redirects us in a different path, and we're willing to learn something new. And one of the most dangerous things we can do in any area of our life, whether it be Christianity or whether it just be your job, is to walk in and act like you know everything. You work with those people? If you don't work with those people, you are those people, right? There's always somebody in every office, so if you can't figure out who it is, then it's probably you. But they know everything, right? And so they can't be taught anything. And that's a bad place to be. A servant is teachable. But a servant, we learned, is also faithful. A servant is faithful, that they're loyal. And we talked that week a lot about how if you're faithful to God, you will automatically serve. That serving Jesus and sharing Jesus with other people is a byproduct of following Jesus. It doesn't make you follow Jesus. It is what you do because you follow Jesus. We're faithful to God. And then last week, we talked about being passionate. That if you're a servant, you're going to be passionate for God's people, or for people in general. That your heart's going to break for people who are struggling, who are hurting, who have needs, who are lost, who don't know Jesus. And you're going to be passionate for them, but you're also going to be passionate, we talked about, for the kingdom of God, not for His kingdom, not for your kingdom. You're not in this to try to figure out what, to be the center of attention, but a servant is someone who's willing to be passionate to fulfill God's kingdom. And today, as you've already heard from Zach, we're going to talk about what it means to be responsive. Let's recap the story of Esther. I think it's important that we I can't tell you every detail. It's 10 chapters, guys. You need to sit down this afternoon if you haven't read it and read the whole book. It's a great book. Honestly, it's the only book in the Bible that the name God is not mentioned, but God is all over the book. You'll see Him in all areas of the book, and their faith is evident there, but the word God is not actually mentioned. Yahweh is not in the Hebrew text at all in the book of Esther. But we have this situation where Esther's become queen. You'll have to read the first 3 chapters to figure all that out. And she sent, and what happened was there was this guy named Haman, and Haman was against the Jews because of Esther's cousin who raised her named Mordecai. And so Haman, because he hated Mordecai, because Mordecai wouldn't bow down and serve him. By the way, Haman was second in command in one of the largest, probably the largest empire of that day, the Persian Empire. And he was second in command, and Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him because he was a Jew. Haman had come up and talked to the king. He bribed him with 10,000 talents of silver, which, as I told you last week, is the equivalent of 750,000 pounds of silver, equivalent to about $5.3 million today. And he bribed him and said, you need to make a decree that on this day, which is about 10, 12 months away, we get to kill all the Jews. And so Mordecai is out, and he is grieving in the streets. The city's been thrown into confusion. All the Jews, not just the city, but as it passed throughout, there were 127 provinces in Persia, from India to Egypt. It was a huge area, and as it passed to each of those provinces, and they began to hear that they were going to die on that, there was a date that was given. In the month of Adar, I believe it was the 10th, it might have been the 12th day, in the month of Adar, they were going to all be allowed to be killed by anyone who wanted to kill a Jew. It's kind of like the purge, if some of you younger people know what that is. But anyway, so they were going to purge all the Jews. And so we get to this place where Mordecai is in the streets, the people in the streets crying and mourning, and they're bitter, and they don't know what to do. And so then Esther comes out, and she sends garments to Mordecai to try to comfort him and to help his situation in grief. You see, I think that when you see people in need, that passion makes you want to help in some way. Now, this wasn't the best way because there needed to be something done, but her first response, she shows a heart that wanted to help. And so she sent out these garments. But then she also told the people, the eunuch that she sent out there, she told him to gather as much information as she could so she could evaluate the situation and figure out what was going on and what she could do to help. And so Mordecai sent word back to her, and the word is that he commanded her. Now, I don't know the situation. I mean, let me say it this way. If you are the father of the President of the United States, do you get to command him to do anything? That's a good question. You know, I don't know. If you're the father, and so he's kind of the father, and here she is the queen. She's not the president, but she's the queen. But he commanded her to go to the king and to beg the king to save the Jews. Does anybody know what her first response was? No. That's the paraphrased version. Her first response was no. She was just like Moses. She said, no, I don't want to go. This is crazy. As a matter of fact, she says, don't you understand that if I go, there's a chance that I'll be killed, because if you go into the king's presence and he hasn't invited you, if he doesn't extend his scepter to you, you will die. So no. The answer is no, I will not, Mordecai, go into them. As a matter of fact, she started making excuses just like Moses did, just like our video did. Started making excuses as to why she shouldn't go. She didn't know what to do. She was wrestling. And her response was no. What's plan B? That's what she said. But Mordecai sent something back to her, and he said, listen, if you don't do this, there will be someone who's raised up. But you are in the best possible place to influence this situation. And so you need to go. How do you know that you have not been put here for such a time as this? And so she began to change the way she was thinking. And she told them to go and hold a 3-day fast and to pray for her. And you remember the last line of chapter 4? And she says, if I perish, I perish. So how did she get from, no, give me plan B, to, all right, if I die, I die? That's a pretty big jump, don't you think? I think the key is this. She responded in spite of the danger that was there. She responded first. See, our tendency is to try to reason first, and then we'll decide if we should respond. But what I'm trying to tell you today is that when God prompts you through His Spirit to do something, to serve somebody, you need to respond. And then you can argue with God about it, but respond. Because if God is sovereign and God is on the throne, then He will do what He wants to do. And if I die, I die. Look, 3 verses is all we're going to read today of this story. Esther chapter 5, verse 1 through 3 is what it says. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. And then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even to half of my kingdom." All she's wanting to do is beg that they don't kill the Jews, and he offers her half the kingdom. Again, I want you to process this. I told you that Haman bribed him with $5.3 million. Do you know how insignificant $5.3 million was back then? He actually told Haman, take the money and do whatever you want with the money. He didn't even take the bribe. He still did what he wanted. Because he didn't need the 5.3 or the 10,000 talents of silver. He didn't need. That's how insignificant. And yet the queen, Esther, had gained so much favor with the king that he was willing to give her half of everything he had. That's how much favor she had with him. That's an influential position, don't you think? What you don't understand is that Esther didn't see that. And I think sometimes we don't see the influential position that God has put us in. It doesn't seem influential because it's not a queen, it's not a king, it's not the president, it's not the governor, it's not someone powerful. It's someone we work with. But my question to you is this. If you could have an ear with someone of power in government, or if you could have an ear with the God who painted the sky this morning, which one is more influential? I don't think there's anyone in this room that has any. I bet there's not even anyone in this room that has power with a city official. Well, yeah, there is, because we got a school board president, right? Yeah. But I bet there's no one in here that can go sit in the governor's office, or go sit in the president's office, or go sit in some powerful position and make something happen. But as a follower of Christ, you have access to the God who painted the sky. And He's placed you in relationships with people that you can influence them. And so Esther went, and she did that. She put her life on the line to save her people. She used I'm going to use, instead of favor, I'm going to use a word, equity. She used the equity that she had earned from the king. You know what I'm saying? She had earned this because she was such a great queen, because she had earned so much favor with him that she earned equity, and she was willing to use that equity to save her people. That's an amazing thing when you're willing to do that. And what's great about our story is when she spent that equity, she earned even more. I'll show you that here in just a minute. See, Esther's plan involved a whole lot of patience. Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet. And they came to the banquet, and when they came to the banquet, the king goes, "What do you want? Even up to half my kingdom." He actually says this 3, maybe 4 times in the whole book. "What do you want? I'll give it to you. Up to half my kingdom." She goes, "Well, if it please the king, tomorrow let's have another banquet." I mean, she slow-played him. That's what I would call it. She slow-played him. And so she continued to build equity again. You know, you spend your equity, it takes time to build it back up, right? So she builds this equity back up. And the next day she has another feast. And it's just for Haman. Haman's all proud that he gets to go to this second feast for just the king and just for her. And in that she exposes who Haman is and that he's trying to destroy her people. And all of a sudden, the king grows angry. And he totally flips the script on Haman. And Haman ends up dying on the gallows that he wanted to hang Mordecai on. And here's that equity she earned. And the king turned around and gave Queen Esther his estate. And gave Mordecai his position. She not only gained equity for herself, she gained equity for her uncle, for her cousin. And the Jews were saved. I'm not going to take the time to explain how they were saved. Go back and read it. It's a great story. She spent that equity and she got more equity. And then in chapter 3, verse 15, you see, we see that when Haman's plot was revealed, the people were thrown into confusion. Because selfish hearts oppress and destroy. When you're not a servant, you go out and you destroy people and you throw people into confusion. But in Esther chapter 8, when Mordecai delivered the news that the Jews were now going to be saved, there was a new decree and the Jews were going to be saved. The people shouted and they rejoiced. And they had, listen to these words, they had light and they had gladness and they had joy and they had honor. And those are the things that God's calling you to bring to people that you serve. That when you bring them the light of Jesus Christ, you bring gladness and joy and honor to their life. And God has placed you in their life for such a time as this, if you'll be willing to respond when He prompts you. Because selfless servants' hearts release and save people, and they become filled with joy. It's funny, too, in chapter 8, verse 17, it says that many of the people declared that they were Jews because now the Jews had the power over all the people. And that's kingdom impact. I don't know if it had right motives in it, but all of a sudden, no, I'm a Jew. I mean, everybody's a Jew now because it flipped the script. They went from being the people who were going to be destroyed to being the people who were influential in the kingdom. And in chapter 10, the last chapter, verse 3, Mordecai, it says, he sought the welfare of his people, and he spoke peace to all people, much different than the confusion that Haman had caused. So, let me ask you these questions. Are there people in your life that you encounter on a regular basis who have needs that you could meet? Are there people in your life who are, and let me say it this way, I'm a preacher, but I think you need to start thinking this way. Do you have people in your life that God has placed in your life that have needs that you can meet? And second question is, what happens if we don't meet those needs? Do you have people in your life that you can meet their need and God has placed them in your life? And what happens if we don't? And here's the big one. Why don't we meet their needs? Let me give you a few things why we don't. First of all, I think it's because of fear. First of all, I think we don't meet their needs. This is what keeps us from responding. We don't meet their needs because of fear. Fear of what? Fear of the outcome, yes. We're afraid of what's going to happen. We're afraid of their response, right? Anybody been there? You're afraid of how they're going to respond to you. And so we're fearful. Maybe we're fear of the unknown. Anybody afraid of the unknown? I don't care how many times that I remember that my mom said God's still on the throne. I'm still afraid of the unknown sometimes, right? When we don't know what's around the corner, it's really, really hard, really difficult. Here's the big one. I think we're afraid to fail. I think we don't respond to the promptings of the Holy Spirit to serve people in need because we're afraid it's going to fail. I could tell you story after story, and I have one in particular where I was meeting with a man, and I was sharing with him, and he was not a believer, and he had some things in his life he didn't want to change. He goes, I'm not here for you to change me. And I said, it's not my job to change you. And so then 6 months later, he walked away from me, and he walked away from the church, and he walked away from that opportunity. And what he said to me was, I just don't think I'm nothing without Jesus like you're saying. And he walked away. And for me, that felt like a failure. But see, I don't think that's failure. Failure would have been me not saying anything to him. I'm going to give you, this is a secular example, okay? This lady is in charge of a company. Men, you probably won't know the company. Women, you will. But some of you men might, and if you do, we might need to talk later. But anyway, she has a great thing that her dad taught her when it comes to this fear of failure. So watch this.
Growing up, my father used to ask my brother and me what we had failed at the dinner table, which was so interesting, and he'd celebrate it, and he'd actually be disappointed if I didn't have something that I failed at that week. So I can remember saying, Dad, I tried out for this, and I was horrible, and he would actually high-five me and say, congratulations, way to go. And what it did was just reframe my definition of failure. Failure for me became not trying versus the outcome. So many people don't take risks for fear of failure. They don't start the business. They don't go create the art they want to create, or they don't go try out to be in the play, or whatever it is, for the fear of failure. And once you redefine that for yourself and realize the failure is just not trying, then life opens up to you in many ways. And I would also, my dad would encourage me anytime something didn't go the way I expected it to, or maybe I got embarrassed by a situation, to write down where the hidden gifts were and what I got out of it. And I started realizing in everything there was some amazing nugget that I wouldn't have wanted to pass up. At Spanx, to encourage people to fail, I'm bringing up my failures in front of the team often. So I will stand up and I call them the oops of Spanx. Some of them are the oops throughout the history of Spanx. Some of them can be recent oops that I did, but I'm always openly talking about it. If you're gonna have a oops, part of the beauty of it is twofold. If there's a failure quote or an oops in your life, if you learn from it and if you can laugh about it, then it's all worth it.
So, we need to understand that, yeah, we're afraid of failing, we're afraid of the outcome, but we need to, failure is not trying, not responding. Well, why else don't we do it? We also sometimes don't do it because we decide that people don't deserve it. We don't respond because we decide that people don't deserve it. And I'm not going to spend any time here because we've already talked about this, but our job is not to decide if people deserve our help or not. Now, please don't confuse this with having discernment. Don't confuse this with reaching a point where you say, you know what, this is not helping, this is hurting. And you got to pray to God that He leads you in that you don't make that decision, that He's telling you that. But many times we are called, we already learned this, we are called to serve the undeserving. Sometimes the only way the undeserving become somewhat deserving is if we'll serve them first. See what I'm saying? If we make all the excuses, we don't respond. But if we respond, the excuses go away, and we just begin to see that God used this in some way. And what He cared more about, you know what He cares more about than that person's need? Some of you won't agree with me on this, but I want you to stick with me. He cares more about how you respond to their need, or He cares at least equally as much how you respond to that need than He does whether or not that need gets met. Because He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He can put food in that person's belly. But He wants to use you to do it. He can comfort somebody, but He wants to use you to do it. He wants you to give the cup of cold water. He wants you to be the one that serves. So we can't decide that. Here's another one. I think we don't do it because we're impatient with the process. We're impatient with the process. Let me ask you a question. If you went home today, guys, I'll ask the guys this. If you go home today and your wife says, hey, you say, what are we having for lunch? And she goes, oh, something I threw in the microwave. How you feeling about that? You all right? You feeling all right? You know, your wife's sitting next to you, she can answer. I know how you feel about it. My wife's not here, I can say it. Ugh. Right? Now, what if you go home and she says, you know what, before we left for church this morning, I put something in the crock pot. And it's going to be ready. It's not even ready at noon. We're going to have to eat about 3 o'clock. You don't care. You'll snack on something because that's going to be good. We had a roast this week my wife made. And we have warmed it up in the crock pot 3 days in a row. Man, it was awesome all 3 days. Some of you go, that's great. No, I'm telling you, it was incredible. It got better in the second and third day. Because the longer you cook something, the better it is, right? And so you've got to be patient with the process. No one expects, listen to me, hear this. We've heard way too many stories that said, well, yeah, I went and I started sharing my faith with them and I served them and we went right to the baptistry and they gave their life to Jesus, right? You hear those stories, you go, oh man, I stink at this then, right? No one's expecting you to take them straight to the baptistry. No one's expecting them to give their life to Christ. As a matter of fact, they might even push back the first time you mention Jesus. But you just keep serving. And you're just patient. And you just go, God, I'm just going to do what you want me to do. Listen to me. Hear me. I want to release some of you of something. Your service to that person and their decision to accept Christ or not accept Christ is not on you. That's not your job. Your job is to serve them and to introduce them to Jesus. It's His job to it's their job, really. He doesn't even force them to. It'd be great if He did, but He doesn't. Failure is not responding to the prompting of the Spirit to serve. Even when they don't deserve it. We talked last week, even then when they're your enemy. Anybody serve somebody this week that doesn't like you? Anybody find somebody this week that thinks differently, looks different than you, acts different than you, sins different than you, and you said, I'm going to do something to serve them? I hope so. Can't do it because we don't do it because of fear. We don't do it because we think they don't deserve it. We're impatient with the process. And I think the other reason that we don't do it is because we want to keep the equity that we've earned. We don't serve people because we want to keep the equity that we have earned. But let me tell you a few things, and some of these it's dangerous, so I had to really process this, but spent equity earns more equity. I believe that spent equity earns more equity. You've heard the phrase, spend money to make money, right? Now, Dave Ramsey will not let me say that without saying this. That is not an excuse to go into debt. I don't believe. That's my personal opinion. But remember the parable of talents? Remember the parable of talents? Remember the guy who hid the money? What happened? What happened to the guy who hid the money? What did the master say to him? What did he call him? You wicked servant. Right? And then you were about to say it. What did he tell him to do with the money he had? Give it to the guy who did something with his. If you want to hold on to the equity that you've earned with that person, nothing's going to happen. As a matter of fact, you will lose whatever you had. Does that make sense? Let me say it this way. I had to walk out of my office when I was studying this, and I said, all right, Chelsea, you got to help me. I said, give me an illustration of how this works in real life. And then pretty quickly she goes, you know what? She said, I had to go out and invest in a camera because I wanted to become a photographer. And I didn't want to let go of the money to buy that camera. But now because I bought that camera, I take pictures and I get paid to take pictures, and now I'm earning something with what I spent that money on. And so that's how it looks. That's how it works. And so when we serve people, we earn equity to these people. You've spent time, you've invested time being their friend. Do you really think that all God wanted you to do was build a relationship so you could root for the same football team? Do you really think that God wanted you to become best friends with this person just so you could go out to dinner with them? God wants you to be in relationship with these people so you can respond to their needs with what He's given you. That's why you've earned the equity. That's why He's allowed you to earn the equity. That's what He wants you to do with the equity. So, let me ask you these questions again. Are there people all around you that God has brought into your life that you regularly encounter who have needs that you could meet? And what happens if you don't meet those needs? See, if not this, then what? If not this, then what? God is prompting you, and there is no plan B. God tells you, listen, if you'll pay attention, I've been walking in the mornings more for my health and for exercise and trying to lose some weight. And so I've been walking. I walked 18 miles this past week. And what's great is I don't set an alarm. When God wakes me up, I get up, I read my Bible, and then I go walk. So however many miles I get to walk. On Sundays, I don't get up early enough because I have to be here earlier. And so I get about 2 to 2.5 miles. A couple days this week, He woke me up so early, I actually got 5 miles in, just walking up and down my street, praying, listening to the Word of God in my ears and praying. And I'm telling you, if you will pause and listen to God, He will speak to you. And you will hear what He wants you to do. And there is no plan B. If not this, then what? Whatever He's asking you to do to serve somebody, do it. Because that's what He wants you to do. You know what He's telling you to do, just do it. But if not you, then who? If not you, then who? You may be the only person who can serve that person or that group of people. God has placed you uniquely in your life for that group of people, for that person that's in your life, for the neighbor that you live next door to, for the person you go to school with, for your parents, for your children, for whoever it is. God has given you this unique opportunity, and He's put you there for such a time as this, and He tells you what He wants you to do to serve that person. So if not this, then what? If not you, then who? God wants you to meet their need. And if not now, then when? If not now, then when? What are you waiting for? You may never get another chance. I want everybody just to stop what you're doing. I want you just to pause for just a minute. that moment's gone. Do it again. Pause. That moment's gone too. It'll never come back. It'll never return. And thankfully, God is gracious and we don't get disqualified when we jump too early on the start of the race or when we make a mistake. But if not now, then when? I know it's just a dog, but we lost one of our dogs yesterday. And it was not on the agenda for yesterday. It wasn't. I went to a funeral yesterday morning. I went to the hospital to visit Jennifer's mom. I drove back home. And in a matter of 2.5 to 3 hours, we went from, my dog is fine, to driving home without my dog. And I know it's just a dog. I get that. And some of you go, no, you love dogs even more than I, not hard to love them a lot more than me, but you love dogs. But it made me think, it's that quick. She went from going to the bathroom in my living room floor and me getting onto her to being instantly blind and never be able to see again like that. And my point is this. That person that God has placed you in their life may not ever get the moment again that God gave you to serve them so that they might see Jesus because of you. And in a moment, it's gone. If not this, then what? If not you, then who? If not now, then when? See, here's the main idea, and you probably already get it. When you encounter a need, you need to respond with what the Spirit tells you to do now, not later. Is that simple enough? When there is a need, you need to respond with what the Spirit is prompting you to do now, not later. And you go, wait, that's crazy. You might be like the guy in the video. I'm not an expert. You might be like Moses. I don't know how to talk. I stutter. That's what Moses, a lot of people think was Moses' problem. I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to serve. I don't know how to do this. That may be the excuses you have. I don't know. Maybe it's like you're going, oh, there'll be plenty of time. Maybe not. Oh, what he's telling me to do is crazy. You've heard me say this before, but I love it. I heard a guy one time say, well, God would never ask me to do anything that was crazy. Oh, okay. Because God always makes sense, right? Yeah. Give 10% of your money or more away. Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, sign me up. Whatever it is, respond. Respond. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm hesitant to use this guy because as soon as I say his name, there are some people in here who are going to say, he doesn't have anything to say to me. So I want to set this up before I use his name. I'm going to tell you a quote from somebody. But here's what I want you to hear, okay? I want you to hear not who this guy is, because many of you will disagree with everything this man says. But I want you to hear this man from the standpoint of what the world sees in Christians. Okay? Don't discount what he says as not being true because you disagree with some of other things that he says. His name is Bill Maher. And he says this. If you ignore every single thing Jesus commanded you to do, you're not a Christian, you're just auditing. You're not Christ followers, you're just fans. If you ignore everything that he tells you to do in this book or that his Spirit prompts you to do, you're not following him. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but I think we got to get that out there. You're not following him. You're a fan of him. You hope you make it to heaven. You're excited that he saved you on the cross, and he did. He offered it to you. But you're not. You can't call yourself a follower of Christ if you're not following him and doing what he says. And I'm telling you, here's the line for me. Here's the thing that I want to give you a little grace in all of this. I don't think you have to say you're not completely following him. I think what you have to say is you're not as mature as you think you are. Because the more you follow Him, the more mature you become, the more He speaks to you, the more you'll start looking like Him, and you'll start doing what He tells you to do, and you will start serving Him. It's just a progression that happens in our life. I choose to follow Him, and I don't get it. I don't know everything, and I'm a baby. I'm still crawling, just like we talked about several months ago. I'm just learning to talk. I'm learning to walk. I'm learning not to mess myself. I'm learning to be a follower of Christ, but we can't stay there. We got to get to this point where we are serving people and meeting their needs. Listen. I've asked you each week to do something specific. First week, I asked you to pray every day that God would give you opportunities to serve, and I hope you're still doing that. And I hate building on these things, so if you need to put that one aside, I think you'll still do it. But I don't want you to think, oh, my goodness, I got 5 things I got to remember. No, but I hope you'll continue. I hope you developed a heart of asking God to give you opportunities to serve people. Then the second week, I told you you need to get the spiritual gifts assessment that we have out on the black table out there. And you need to go through that and figure out how you're wired. And listen, because you need to be doing ministry how you're wired. You know, I don't want a doctor who's not passionate about medicine, right? So we don't need people serving in areas that they're not passionate about. So figure out how God wired you. And I don't want a doctor that's not experienced in medicine. So you want to be experienced and you want to have these personality traits. So do that. And we talked about fasting. And I'm going to tell you, it was a glorious day the day I did that. And I want to do it some more because I didn't even get hungry, really, to be honest with you, because my focus was just where it needed to be. And it was a great thing. And we talked about fasting. And last week I told you need to go serve people that are different than you, people who maybe even you would call your enemies. I'm going to give you something that, and you can say no to this, but this is the most active, easiest response I can give to you. This weekend, Love OKC one-day event is going to be happening at the fairgrounds, and it serves between 6,000 and 8,000, maybe 10,000 people. They have medical services for them. They have groceries they give out. They give them hot meal. They give them a family portrait. They give them haircuts if they need it. All kinds of. There's actually a job fair there where each year they've been able to find jobs for people, and it's just a great event, and it's free to the public. The Oklahoma City Public Schools buses in people, and I'm going to just challenge you. I've been involved in this for about 5 years now, since it started. And it's an incredible event. And the fairgrounds lets us use the fairgrounds for free. It's incredible what happens. And I'm going to ask you, you're going to be handed a card on the way out, so you don't have to write all this down. You don't have to write down the website, but there's going to be a card that you get on the way out. And if you don't want to use your computer and sign up that way, then you need to come to Chelsea or me, and we will get you signed up. But I'm asking you, this Saturday, it's 8 to 4. If you can't do 8 to 4, do 8 to 12. I don't care. Do 12 to 4. But I want to encourage you to go serve the needs of people. And so to respond to this message today, just do it. And go sign up. And take your Saturday and give it away to somebody else. And let it be a springboard. Because we only do this once a year. Let it be a springboard to serving people all the time. All the time. Just do it. Just do it. Pray with me, and I'm going to show you a video, and then we're going to sing. God, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing in our lives. And Lord, I thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to serve you by serving people. And so now, God, I ask that you will help us to be responsive when people have needs, and we will just do it. We will serve people. I will do what you tell me to do right now, not later. And I'll watch what you do as I can meet people's needs day to day. God, we love you. And I just hope that you'll help us respond to this message. In your name we pray. Amen.
Jesus, I am so excited today. It's like I woke up and thought, today is the day to get working for Jesus.
Kat, I'm so excited to find someone who's ready to take action and get things done.
Oh man, I am that girl.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I've got something perfect for you. So let's get started. What are you doing? Stand up. Remember, we were going to take action.
Yeah, but this is where I always sit.
Right, but I need more than this.
Oh, I know what you're getting at. Okay, Jesus, how much do you want?
What?
$50? Is that enough?
Oh, that's not what I meant.
Oh, all right. Well, 100 then, you know. I mean, you drive a hard bargain. Okay, but you might not want to cash this till next Friday. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There you go.
Okay, Kat, really, I do think it's great that you want to give, but I want you to mentor a younger woman.
Ooh, yeah, right. Well, Jesus, you know, I'm not really into, like, teaching people and stuff. I mean, I don't really get into that.
Okay, okay, you know that woman at the office, Amy?
Yeah.
I want you to take her out to lunch. Tell her about me.
Well, Amy is different. I mean, like, really different, you know?
I know, but she needs to know about me.
And I can tell the people at the church to call her. I mean, they get paid to do things like that.
I want you to do that.
Jesus, I just don't feel comfortable doing that.
What are you doing? I am waiting for my coffee. I'm fighting off a panic.
No, Kat, the problem is
Something to lighten the stress.
you're too
A
comfortable.
little light reading. Some lovely calendar choices. Would rather glue.